I have a question, Stuart. Can you talk about because Rudy says and you say the work brings more work. Can you talk about the next levels of tension or energy or how that works? Because I'm noticing in a sense what I'm considering more work, like deeper tensions, so on and so forth.
Well, Rudy was right about that. When you are really open to receive spiritual energy, you're connected with energy that is infinite in the universe. And you build inside yourself a system that can keep taking on more responsibility, more service, more work in the world. You become like Shiva, you have many arms. And each of those arms can truly take on responsibility in life. And the stronger we get inside, the more will be given to us. I mean, I know it's been the story of my life, it never stops. And I've been doing this for a really long time. That the work that I do really brings a deeper level of work. A deeper level of work brings, excuse me, more responsibility. And, I remember Rudy talking about that, excuse me, all the time. And I saw it in him. And then, as I, said in one of my other classes, my sole responsibility when I was 25 years old was a $38 a month rent, and killing cockroaches in the kitchen of my apartment. And that was about it. About it. As I really matured in Rudy's work, it became unimaginable running it. Meditations, helping to run meditation centers around the world, running a business, having a family. I mean, it was unbelievable, paying enormous rents in order to support a meditation center. I mean, it got so far away from $38 a month that it was very easy to understand this thing about work, bringing more work. And it wasn't, stupid work. It was wonderful work. It was work that did nothing but make me continue to grow in my life. I was always grateful for it. And yeah, I used to complain about it because it was really a lot. And it still is a lot, In many ways, it's kind of leveled off, but it's still a lot. And sometimes you get very tired of this, but never for a minute would I ever turn my back on doing God's work in the world. Supporting what my responsibilities are, not manufacturing it in my brain. It just comes. It comes. And as it comes, you get a clearer vision of yourself and the world and the ability of what you're capable of doing. And I think it's really an extraordinary thing because it's nothing. I mean, I could have never sat down when I was 30 years old and plotted out my life. There's no way. I could have gone to some career counseling in colleges and they would have plotted out the kind of life that I've lived. It was work brought more work. As I got bigger inside, I could take more responsibility on myself. And as I took more responsibility on myself, it demanded that I had to get closer and closer to higher energy in order to get what I needed in order to take care of that responsibility without it drowning me. I never knew about this until I met Rudy. Because my whole thing before 25 was the avoidance of work. I would do anything. I would work 3 months, 2 months, 5 months, and I did all kinds of jobs, for God's sake, both here in the United States and when I lived in Europe. Everything from working, in movies to shoveling and delivering coal and God knows what else I did, working on the docks in Germany. I mean, I did all kinds of work, but it was the kind of work that made me want to avoid work. After I met Rudy, it became the kind of work that made me embrace work. And it also gave me the ability to say, Stuart, now it's time to move on to something else. So there's all kinds of work, there's that work shoveling, and I used to tell you what that job was like. I mean, at the end of the day, you know, I was in movies with, Woody Allen and Richard Burton and Elizabeth Taylor and all kinds of people like that, that I used to do when I lived in Paris. Yeah, that was fun work, but it was still, work that made me want to avoid work. It was only after I met Rudy and I truly made a commitment to have, a spiritual life in a real way, that I began to embrace the pressure of work and the pressure of that kind of growth. And I began to see that it was the only way I could get free of myself. You don't get free of yourself by hiding out from the world. You get free of yourself by embracing life, by doing what you have to do in the world in order to, be responsible to God and not your ego and your thinking and your, stuff like that. So yes, work brings more work. And when it's in the service of God, it's amazing work. You do nothing but embrace it. And yeah, you get tired and you get, my God, you get tired, for God's sake. Running ashrams around the world, having to travel. I mean, look, even, 2 years ago, I traveled almost 100,000 miles just to teach this meditation. And then God gave me Zoom, thank God. I don't have to go anywhere to do it. But it was 98,000 miles, according to United Airlines. And it was solely in the doing of this meditation that I did that. It was work that really brought more work. And then God said, I'm going to give you a break. We're going to give you COVID and Zoom, and you can not have to travel around the world to do what you were doing. So yeah, work brings more work. And when it's work for God, it's the most extraordinary work. And avoiding it is just bullshit, because you never grow. Yeah, I avoided shoveling and delivering coal, working on the docks in Germany. I was a cobble schlepper at a television station when I lived in Germany. I mean, that's the kind, with the TV cameras, I would run after them with the cables. I did all, that was work that I truly, in my early years, tried to avoid. I tried to avoid it. As soon as I learned what it was to serve God, I just embraced it. I said, this is another level of consciousness. It's another level of being. You do what you have to do in order to continue to serve a higher force in the universe. I hope that's clear, I mean, because I think this is a very important subject, and it's a subject that most people avoid. People, try to do as little as possible in life and think they're getting away with something. They're not. They're just doing damage to themselves. They create stagnant pools of water around them, and that's what they live in. And for the love of God, I hope I never have to retire. I hope I do this to the day I leave the world. Because I don't know what else. What else is there? Sitting on a rocking chair and looking out at the Atlantic Ocean in Palm Beach? For God, I would probably blow my brains out and live that way. So there's work we avoid, and then there's work we embrace. And there's a fine line that separates the two. But as you continue to grow, you really are capable of seeing that line and stepping across it. Does anyone else have a question they would like to ask?
Thank you, Stuart.
You're welcome. Keep asking questions, Wendy. They're great. And they bring up so much good stuff that I'm very grateful to you for doing that, really.
My pleasure. There's so much that comes through your answers. It's just a blessing. And I used to have a radio show, so maybe that's why I can ask questions.
I've done about 2,000 radio programs, and maybe that's why I can answer them. I'm gonna do a thing where I'm gonna have, I don't know how many CFOs from JP Morgan Chase come to a Zoom talk that I'm gonna give. I mean, that's gonna be really interesting. They're giving me like 20 minutes to a half hour to try to teach these people how to manage stress. It's really something. I'm really looking forward to that in a way. It should be something really interesting. This woman who my daughter works for, one of her bosses, said to her, "Do you know anything about chakras?" So my daughter says, "Yeah, I know a little bit, but I live with a guy who's my father, who really is one of the great experts in the world." "Really?" So, oh my God, we need him to come talk to everybody here at JP Morgan. Cracked me up. Work brings more work, and you never know what kind of work it's going to bring, and how you might touch. There might be 100 people there, and it might touch 3 people, and it's worth doing, Does anyone else have a question they would like to ask?
What if you don't know what your work is or what you should be doing?
Oh, I promise you, just keep opening and it will just come to you, it'll come. It'll have to come. If you just keep building a system in yourself that gets you closer to your enlightenment, closer to God, they will send you enough work that you will never ask a question like that again. I promise you. When you're able to cross that line, where you're able to, really totally surrender in such depth who you are and what you are, and all, the comforts, the this, the that, the white picket fence and everything that people think represents security in life. When you're willing to surrender to that kind of debt, they will send you what to do in service of God, that you will not believe what will come to your life. Does anyone else have a question? And look, all work is sacred. Whatever you do in life, it's sacred. It serves some kind of purpose in the world. Shoveling and delivering coal in Austria kept people warm. It served some with a horrible job, but doing it, people were kept warm there, Every job has something sacred about it. And as soon as when I used to wait tables and work in restaurants and bars and stuff, I did that for a number of years when I was younger. I finally began to discover the sacred nature of that job and how I could grow because of it. When I finally said to myself, "Stuart, if you have to spend the rest of your life doing this, you're going to do the most extraordinary job possible, and you're not going to get fired ever again from this job. And if you have to spend the rest of your life, all right, accept yourself and your limitations and who and what you are." I'll never forget when I made that commitment with the last job I ever had as a waiter. And when I finally quit, it was maybe 6, 8 months later, the boss of the restaurant came up to me and said, if you ever need a job, Stuart, you're always welcome to work here. And I knew I was finished with that type of work for the rest of my life. But it was that commitment to seeing how can this job help me to grow as a human being, whatever it is, you know, waiting tables, delivering coal, you know, being an extra in the movies. What can it do? And it took years for me to learn how to make that work for me in terms of my humanity and my spiritual growth. And when I finally learned that, it freed me of a lot of different things that I had to do when I was younger. Does anyone else have a question you'd like to ask? I remember I had a friend who came to work at this restaurant, and he had to be probably the world's worst waiter. This guy, and I remember for like a couple of weeks, I was doing two jobs, his job and my job, and trying to help him get, he finally, you know, I don't know if they fired him, he got quit, but he left. But I was working and I said, all right, I'll do both. He's a good friend of mine. I'll do whatever I can. And I grew because of that. I'll never forget how much I grew because of that job. And it was the last time I ever did that. But it was that commitment I made. What is this going to teach me about me and how I have to grow as a human being and how I have to use this to build a strong inner life? Because everything is sacred. Every job is sacred. We just have to know how to use it consciously. Does anyone else have a question they would like to ask?
Stuart, my question is that before I began to practice with you, I was always working on projects that exhausted me. I didn't stop working. I burned myself out because I tried so many different things, but I didn't have the spiritual practice that would allow me to grow.
Claudia, dear, you know, everything we're talking about was a combination of doing this meditation with working in the world. Everything prior to that, all the jobs I resented and was angry at and exhausted, you know, had nothing. I had no spiritual training. I had no spiritual development to myself. It's only when I began to have that spiritual development that I began to see things differently. And I began to accept life on a different level. You know, even the business I was in, I never liked being a merchant. You know, I never like, you know, especially I used to always have a hard time. I was very good at it, but I couldn't, you know, dealing with clients and people that used to buy things from me. But I said, okay, you'll have to grow until you like this. And also, what is this doing? It's supporting a center, you know, making a lot of money where you can support a center, which is enabling 100 to 150 people a week to come and do deep meditation. And I also understood it was through the building of a chakra system that I was able to do this. I was able to run a gallery in New York City. I never had a thought when I was younger about running a gallery, you know, but it provided, it was sacred, you know, it really made it possible for me to grow as a teacher and as a human being. So I had to be grateful for it and do it with gratitude, with love, with, everything that really was possible for me to learn from it, how to grow as a human being and how to have a spiritual life.
Mhm.
If it
I
was
get,
if it was just about money, I would have probably quit within 2 weeks.
I was practicing with Buddhism and Sufism and many other things before I began to practice with you. And I was doing things I wanted to
What is the
do.
question? Please, you can go on for a half an hour. Ask a question.
I was doing work that I wanted to do. I worked at a museum. I worked
What is
for,
the question?
it
Ask,
took,
ask me a question. I don't want to.
okay, the question is, how come I was separated from being able to separate my work from from the spiritual practice until I came upon the Rudra meditation? It wore me out.
Because Claudia, none of those meditations was teaching you how to develop a chakra system. I don't know what they taught you, but you weren't working to build the chi in yourself, the foundation in yourself. You weren't developing the whole chakra system. You weren't becoming a whole person. And I don't know what these people teach you. I don't go to those classes. And not all spiritual work is the same. This work goes directly to developing a system in yourself, that can really work in the world and be free of the world at the same time. That can really, enable you to take an enormous amount of pressure on yourself and not resent it, because you understand that to succeed at that pressure in those jobs, you have to grow inside yourself. You have to get stronger. And how do you get stronger? You got to build a chakra system that is strong enough to do it. That's probably the reason why, because this works, specifically on developing that kind of an inner life that enables you to be a very active person in the world. And at the same time, be connected to God. And if you're connected to God, you're not going to resent life. You're going to recognize that life around you and what you do every day is sacred.
Well, I'm very grateful. It took me a long time to find you.
Well,
And
I'm grateful too, Claudia. But Claudia, please do me a favor. When you ask a question. Don't go on for a half hour about all your life experiences. Get centered enough inside yourself that you can ask a question, 1 or 2 sentences, because it gets much better that way, because the answers come out in a clearer way, and you will learn more if you can do that by just learning how to focus that way.
okay.
Does anyone else have a question?
Stuart,
Yes, Larry.
you frequently say that our life here is Maya. Is that saying that we're here to experience many different situations to teach us and help us grow? And it's just
We're here to learn how to transform Maya into a spiritual life. We're here to learn to transform the illusion, which is most of life. Because everything is, it's all, comes and it goes, nothing in this world is permanent. Nothing. The only thing that's permanent is a connection with spirit. So it's all an illusion. Again, I've said it 100 times, you get 8 billion people, everybody's seeing a different reality. So the realities we see, it's all an illusion. Nobody else in the world sees reality exactly the way we see it. So our job is to transform illusion, Maya, into reality. And it's exactly what I've been talking about for the last 15 minutes. When the work you do becomes sacred, Maya, becomes reality. When the work you do teaches you how to get closer to God, how to recognize the very sacred nature of life, Maya becomes reality. Now, in order to do this, you've got to build an inner life that is strong enough to do it, that is connected with spirit, and then you can do this kind of thing. And this is a wonderful thing, because suddenly everything we dislike about the world becomes something that's teaching us how to get closer to God. Does anyone else have a question they would like to ask? Okay, if there are no more questions, God bless you all. Thank you. And again, in all humility, I am so grateful to be part of this, to be doing this. And I, bless you. Thank you. And there'll be a class tomorrow evening, and I'm looking forward to seeing everybody. And have a good
Thank you,
evening.
Stuart.
Bless you.
God bless.
Stuart.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
Thank you. Bless you, Stuart.
Good
See
night.
you tomorrow.